So when did you get into Jane Austen?
So we read Pride and Prejudice in high school. I was one of those kids in high school that, the teacher would assign read the first 5 chapters, and I'd come back the next day having read the whole book, just like baffled that nobody else did that. So that was my first taste of Jane Austen. Read her whole repertoire, which is not a lot. Um, but then in college, I found out about Jane Austen fan fiction as well. Just summer reading, and I was like, oh, it's like there's hundreds and hundreds of Jane Austen books now. So it opened up a whole world.
So can you explain a little bit about the fan fiction? So do they use the same characters, or are they the same settings and they just sort of put them in different situations, or how does that work?
Yeah, so it'll take the same characters, and some of the situations will be similar, but it's a lot of kind of like what ifing.
Mm-hmm.
What if Darcy and Elizabeth met under different circumstances, if they had different obstacles to overcome? And sometimes it'll just be something a simple little domino effect. If you tweak something at the beginning, it sets off a chain reaction of completely different events.
Oh, okay. So there's a lot of possibility there. At first, I thought that would be kind of a limiting form of genre fiction, but it seems like you can do a lot with that.
I think there's limitless possibilities of what you can do with it. And because of what the characters are like, I think it's really easy. They have such strong personalities that you can put them in all these different situations and keep them true to themselves. And you still see and recognize what you like about Darcy and Elizabeth, no matter what kind of things you throw at them.
Wow. So I guess for any fan fiction, the characters have to stand the test of time, and they have to be pretty well built characters to go through all of those different situations or possibilities.
Well, yeah, and with Pride and Prejudice, Elizabeth is widely credited as being the first dynamic female heroine in literature. So I think that readers, they really want to see what they recognized in the original book in her.
Hmm.
And if you change Darcy and Elizabeth too much, I mean, you're just writing original material with the same name. So you have to walk the fine line of keeping them true to their characters. But as a writer, it's a challenge that I enjoy.
Mm.
And as a reader, I'm a fierce critic.
Off with their heads. Um, what enticed you to Jane Austen's works? And you keep mentioning the characters, Darcy and Elizabeth. What about the characters or the stylistic tendencies of Jane Austen sort of drew you toward her?
I appreciate the way she can tell a story, and you can be very invested in the characters and the outcomes, but she's laughing at everyone the whole time. It's really wonderful. Jane Austen is just the OG shade queen. Her sass is just beautiful. It's just, she creates such vivid characters without, it's not the cheesy kind of stereotypical thing. Like, she creates characters that, she knew somebody like that in her life. You probably know somebody like that in your life, whether, it's like an overly talkative, embarrassing parent, or, just like a goofy neighbor who will embarrass you in public. Just the characters she creates are so endearing and so specific that,
Mm.
and she walks a really fine line of poking fun at them, but you're still cheering them on.
Interesting. And what about the setting, the Regency era in British history? Is there something in that setting that draws you to it, or do you just like to watch Jane Austen react against the setting? Or
I think it was an interesting time, with what was going on in the world, and in the lives of women who were her primary readers. Um, women back then were reading more and more. So there was something going on called novel mania, and parents would just scoff at their daughters and, you know, wonder why they were always so obsessed with reading books. But it was this burgeoning, you know, era of literature by women for women that Jane Austen was participating in. And there was a certain amount of shock value at the time that can sometimes be lost on modern readers. But just the idea of Elizabeth Bennet, her family is broke and, you know, not the classiest bunch of people, and she refuses like the richest dude any of them has ever even met in their lives, and not only refuses an offer of marriage from him, but really gives him the business and tells him off like beautifully. Nowadays, you know, people wouldn't bat an eye at somebody behaving like that, but that back then, to be a young woman reading something like that was just really empowering, and even more so because people weren't so bombarded with content the way we are today. So what people were reading had more meaning because of that. So I think that Jane Austen gets a bad rap as being, you know, it's just books about people getting married and going to each other's houses, but it's so much more than that, because all of these women, they really do have their own sense of agency in a world where that wasn't common. And with the exception of Emma, all of her heroines, you know, it's not money that enables them to have that agency. It's just inner strength. I think that's really great.
So that's pretty inspiring. Tell us what it was like to write your first book. So your first piece of Jane Austen fan fiction. What was your writing process like then? Would you start with an outline, or would you just sort of, you know, attack the page, so to speak, and just like kind of write off the cuff, or a combination of both?
It was a combination of both. I'm more of a planner than a pantser. I have huge respect for people who can just go fly by the seat of their pants with writing. Those people are lunatics to me that I admire immensely. So I do plan. And the plans change as I go, but I want to know what journey the characters are going to go on. I like for my characters to grow over the course of the story, so I at least have to be able to see, you know, where their interactions with each other are going to take them. My first book was a little different. I was still working full-time when I wrote, so that one took a little while longer. I think I spent like 9 or 10 months on my first novel. It was very different because I didn't really think about publishing it until I was closer to the end of the story. So the first good chunk of it, maybe the first 2/3 of it, I was really just writing it to see if I could write a book.
And you did. And how many revisions did you go through for the first one?
Looking back, I would say probably not enough. But I think 2. So I would write a chapter, and then I would do an initial edit on it, and then I did a second revision once everything was done.
So how did that change with some of the subsequent books that you released? How did your writing process change, if at all?
After my first book, I left the hotel industry, which was a wonderful feeling. I started writing full time, so I was able to kind of like condense that process instead of just a few hours, a few nights a week after work. Kind of quickly turned into my full-time job. Just a big chunk of most of my days would be spent either writing or doing. And there's a lot of other parts of writing besides just sitting down at your computer and writing the book. There's a lot more less glamorous, less obvious parts to writing a book. But doing that full time, I think with each book, I've gotten a little better at editing as I go and kind of anticipating critical feedback for certain things.
Hmm.
That phrase "kill your darlings." Oh, I am so good at it now. I can massacre my darlings without batting an eye. So I think I think I've learned to kind of tighten the writing up a little bit and get a little bit more in depth with taking multiple storylines and like tying so many people's character arcs together in ways that are surprising once you get to the end of the story.
Does writing dialogue come naturally to you, or do you struggle with it?
Writing dialogue to me is one of the easier parts of writing,
Ooh.
simply because something that I do when I'm writing or when I'm laying out a scene. So I start with my outline, and then I have my bullet points, and then those bullet points have their bullet points until I know what's going to happen in a scene. And I'll just take my phone, turn on the video, and just set it down next to me and speak the scene out loud. And then I have a 20-minute video on my phone that I can sit down with and type things out. So all the dialogue that I write sort of gets vetted in that process because I'm literally speaking all of the dialogue out loud and I can hear how it sounds. So there's nothing that's going to sound unnatural for somebody to speak out loud because of how I write it.
That sounds like a genius idea, and I hope all of the viewers who write attempt that. I'm going to go home and try that because I'm awful at dialogue. I avoid it at all costs. Wish I could write it.
Mine is very dialogue driven. One project that I want to move on to next year is to adapt Madness in Maritime to a screenplay, actually. And I feel like, yeah, that could be coming to a theater somewhere, sometime soon, maybe, question marks. We'll see. But I feel like my writing lends itself very easily to a movie script just because what I'm imagining in my head is very similar to scenes in a movie or scenes in a series. And so it'll jump from these characters having dialogue, a little bit of exposition, to the next scene of dialogue with characters.
And you mentioned earlier off camera that you are good at writing chaos and how you sort of start with a small situation and it escalates into some sort of chaotic argument or situation. So what is it about chaos that attracts you?
Familiarity, probably.
I
have always felt like I'm a chaos magnet in my personal life, and it's something that I've learned to lean into over the years. And I feel like that's something that resonates specifically with writing the character of Elizabeth Bennet. You know, her mom is unfiltered, unrestrained, often obnoxious, arguably one of the more feminist Austen characters, in my opinion. But, you know, she's got that kind of a mom. Her dad just laughs at everything. She's got 4 sisters. So she has one of those lives that doesn't have a lot of moments of silence in it. I feel like she lends herself to chaos very, very easily. And especially when you're juxtaposing Mr. Darcy, who's very quiet and stoic and all about, you know, his dignity and his pride. Throwing Elizabeth Bennet and her chaos at him is just so fun. So in all of my books, I like to have a chaos sequence where things slowly escalate to the point where I've got, you know, 10, 12 people all shouting at each other at once. It's fun to have all hell break loose. And in my work in progress right now, the crossover between Pride and Prejudice and Emma, I have a scene where Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth are having a romantic moment in the library, and literally 12 people walk in on them and start screaming, and Mrs. Bennet is fainting, and Emma Woodhouse is there, and Caroline Bingley is having, you know, a seizure, and it's it's so much fun when I can get that to make sense in the context of the story, but just have all hell break loose unexpectedly.
And I mean, you know, most readers love conflict. That's why you're reading fiction. And then I'd say most readers like a kind of artfully ordered chaos. That can be such a delightful thing to watch a really well ordered chaos kind of play out, you know.
Absolutely. And I think one of the unique things about Jane Austen fan fiction within the world of historical fiction is that there's an element you don't see in regular historical fiction of just really the readers being there for the characters, and just they love these characters from literature so much that seeing them in new situations, I have to really focus on making sure what I'm writing is actually driving the story forward, because it's so easy to get lost in just the sort of like fan service of what happens if I put these two people together and just like let them interact in a way we've never seen before. You know, for instance, in my work in progress, having Emma Woodhouse react to Mrs. Bennet in a way like she would have reacted to Miss Bates in the original, or scenes like that. It's a lot of fun being able to take all of these beloved characters and just throw them at each other and kind of see what sort of chemical reaction blows up.
Even if you don't want to focus on a whole novel with one chemistry, could you do like multiple short stories of different characters from Jane Austen and have like a book of short stories or something?
That's a fantastic idea. I know there are collections of short stories out there. To be honest, there's so much Jane Austen fan fiction in the world. I haven't even read it all. It would be something I'd love to devote more of my time to. But I know there are short stories, and I know there have been other crossovers out there. But yeah, I think a book of short stories of just, you know, having those kind of interactions.
Your chemistry experiments, essentially.
Yes, I'm kind of a mad scientist in a certain sense.
So when you're writing, how do you straddle the line between adding your own creative take on Jane Austen's novels while still staying true to the spirit of her work and characters? How do you find that perfect balance between your own sort of creative stamp and preserving Jane Austen's world?
It's a challenge for sure, and it's something that I often have to remind myself that characters living 200 years ago wouldn't necessarily have the same kinds of reactions that, you know, modern men and women would have in certain situations. And a lot of it is just taking, you know, situations that might have happened in the original and saying, well, if Elizabeth Bennet acted this way in this situation, you know, what's the closest reaction I can think of that would compare? But as far as putting my own creative twist on that, one thing that I like to do that I've done in most of my novels is actually take characters from multiple Austen novels and throw them together and see how they react to one another, which is definitely something that I feel like we don't see enough of within fan fiction communities. Even within the Jane Austen fan fiction community, it hasn't been done as often as you would think. I think it makes perfect sense. Currently, I have a work in progress that throws together the characters of Pride and Prejudice and the characters of Emma. And it may be an unpopular opinion. I know it's an unpopular opinion, but I feel like Elizabeth Bennet and Emma Woodhouse are so the same that they would really love each other, but they would hate each other so much first. So that's been fun to explore. And really the only way to keep them true to their characters is to compare how they reacted within, you know, the confines of their own original texts. And from there, it's just guesswork of how they would really interact with each other. But it's been so much fun.
And so you're currently working on this. How long have you been working on the project you're combining the two?
I started it in July. This one is not coming together as fast as my other projects, partly just because I've done a cross-country move in the middle of that writing. But it's it's something that I definitely am handling a little differently, because I feel like these are two heroines that people have very strong opinions about. So I want to really get this right. But I am having a lot of fun with it.
Awesome. And I just wanted to say, I came to work today to with the intent of doing this interview, and I'm like, I need to check out some of her books. And I went to check them out off the local author shelf, and your two older ones are both checked out by
Oh
two
my
different
goodness.
people. So I mean, it's impressive that it's circulating. And I was like, what would draw my eye to these books? And then I was thinking the cover art is pretty nice on all of them. The titles, something about oh gosh, what was the title? Name some of your titles.
I think I gave you guys a copy of Madness in Maritime.
We have that one. We actually haven't cataloged this one yet. Madness in
Okay.
Maritime. This is your most recent finished work, right?
That is number 6. So no.
No.
That was
Okay, we're behind.
2 books ago.
Jeez, you are prolific. Okay. and what? So, can you tell us the titles of 1 through 5?
Let's see. There was Happier and Her Friends and Relations. A little bit of a mouthful. And the second one was a sequel to that, Unexpected Friends and Relations. So that is part of a series where it's all of Jane Austen's characters from all of her novels, and they're all like interconnected to each other. And then my third one was called A Sister's Curse. It's a little bit dark, but the Darcys adopt the Bennets when they're very, very young, and the parents die. I kill the parents off kind of a lot. My fourth one was Strong Objections, which was a lot of fun. I had Lady Catherine drop dead in the very opening scene. Spoiler alert. that was a huge like, should I do this? I don't know if it's too much, but every time I wonder if I'm going too far, it turns out to be something that fans love. So I have to just trust my instinct.
You have to keep going too far.
For readers who are familiar with my work, or familiar with the Pride and Prejudice film, there's a really, really memeable scene in the Pride and Prejudice movie where Mr. Collins is like the embarrassing parson cousin that just like everyone hates this dude, and he's talking about what excellent boiled potatoes, and just I had him choked to death on a boiled potato after being punched in the head at dinner in one of my books. And I had to do a lot of research on writing farce to make sure that I wasn't like going way too far. But I read this really amazing article by John Cleese about how if you're going to write farce, you want ridiculous things to happen, but in a way that makes sense, that these crazy over-the-top choices people are making are actually the most logical thing they could do in that situation. And I created a situation where the most logical thing that could happen was Lady Catherine punches Mr. Collins in the face at dinner, and he chokes to death on a boiled potato.
Boiled potato. Oh my gosh. That's quite fun. So, and then your fifth book, what was the name of your fifth?
My fifth book was Outmatched. So that was my first. It's kind of got like a bluish purple cover, I think.
Okay, I think that was one of the ones checked out, and then there was one other one. Something. Oh gosh, I forget. I should have wrote it down before I came in here. But yeah, anyway, they're both checked out. And so tell us a little about Madness in Maritime, which is the one we are about to add to the collection.
Oh, yay. So that one is, the premise is sort of a Groundhog's Day trope, which it has been done before in the world of Jane Austen fan fiction. There are a couple of fantastic variations that I've read. One of them has Elizabeth repeating the same day over and over again, and the other one has Mr. Darcy repeating the same day over again. So I'm a very big go big or go home. So I thought, what if they're both repeating the same day over again while they're still not huge fans of one another, to keep it interesting. So they're both repeating the same day, and by the time they find out that the other one is also stuck in this loop of time, they have to work together and kind of overcome their dislike of one another to try to create the ideal sequence of events over the course of the day. And they have very different opinions on what that looks like, that they have to work together. And there's a few other twists and turns involved. but I had a lot of fun with it.
Would you say they both became better people by the end of your book?
Yes.
Yeah, that's affirming to hear. So, can you tell us a little about your cover design, editing, formatting adventures with your books? You did tell me earlier that you design your own covers, right? Or you design the most recent covers of your books.
I've designed all of my covers except the one for Outmatch.
Okay.
The one for Outmatch, I did kind of come up with that concept of the photo gallery, and a friend of mine who has a strong background in animation did the actual artwork for me. So that was a lot of fun. But the other 7, I did the covers myself.
Wow. And so what software did you use? Was it painstaking to do, or did it all kind of come quickly when you were putting the cover together, or any of the covers together?
I think the most recent book, so for Five Daughters, that one was the hardest one. That one is actually a fusion of 8 different paintings that I cut and pieced together. Hopefully with a fairly seamless effect. I hope.
Okay, so that's the other book that we have on the shelf that was
Yes, you
checked
have.
out. Okay, got it. Cool.
That
So
is the one that I wrote inside the Friendswood Library.
that's right. You sat next to the window in the cafe area, which is a wonderful writing space.
It's a great spot. I would get there first thing in the morning so nobody could get my spot because it was the best seat in the house.
So future writers or current writers, if you want to feel inspired, come to the Friendswood Library, and you two could sit in the same seat that Jayne Bamber sat in and she was composing Outmatched. So,
Five Daughters.
oh, Five Daughters for Five Daughters. So, do you like to write mainly in libraries, or do you prefer writing at home, or it just varies?
It varies. Um, it does vary. Actually, I haven't really found my writing spot yet here in Colorado. I've kind of tried different parts of the house and I'm still working on it. I'm more of an outdoor writer and I don't have a great outdoor access point right now, especially as it starts getting colder. So I'm figuring that out. What appealed to me about writing at the library was just those big, beautiful windows right there. It was perfect for me.
Mm. Yeah, you can see there's the traffic, the passerbys, the landscape. Yeah. So maybe in Colorado you can like climb up a mountain and you can start writing Ernest Hemingway fan fiction. No, I'm kidding.
Just drink to excess.
Yeah. That doesn't end well. That doesn't end well.
I will not be able to get back down the mountain.
Tumble on down the mountain. Okay, so what advice would you give to fledgling authors looking to get into the self-publishing world?
I would say don't hold back. Just go for it. I would definitely say it's not as daunting as it probably seems. That was something that when I finished my first novel, the idea of going through the publication process was very intimidating to me. And I was fortunate to have other author friends talk me through the process. And when I realized how much easier it was than I thought it would be, I wished I had done it so much sooner.
Hmm.
And I do have some author friends in my life that I am encouraging to get published. Randy, if you're watching this, talking to you, babe. But just, I would say go for it. Self-publication, it's such a satisfying feeling. And you never know what your work might mean to somebody else. So you have nothing to lose. Writers out there, just go for it.
Just go for it. So where can we find your books if we want to purchase them?
They are available for purchase on Amazon, Kindle, Kindle Unlimited, and as of yesterday, all 8 of my books are on Audible as well. I'm very fortunate to have my most recent one, Five Daughters, is narrated by Stevie Zimmerman. Anyone who reads a lot of Jane Austen fan fiction will probably recognize that name. Beautiful narrator, gives voice to all the characters just brilliantly. I did some great stuff with Lady Catherine in this book, and she nailed it. So I'm very excited about that project.
So do you just directly email potential narrators, or does someone help you match a narrator to a story, or how does that work when you're adapting it to an audiobook?
Well, you post it on Audible, and you can select a portion of the novel. I usually do something that has the most amount of characters in a given scene, but you post a few pages for audition, and anybody, you can set your preferences. So obviously I always want a British narrator for mine. And I do prefer female narrators, of course, but you can, tweak things specifically to what you're looking for, and then narrators can come in and audition. So I always receive a fair amount of auditions. It was very hard to choose this last time around. I had a lot of great people that I hope I can work with in the future. But having Stevie audition, just I kind of, after I finished like swooning and fainting to the ground, I was like, let's make this happen. So that was fantastic. And there are some that I have used more than once as well that have just done such a great job with my work that I always reach out to them when I have something new.
And you have quite a few reviews on Amazon. How does that make you feel? Most of them are good too, if not all of them.
It's unreal. It really is. And I've connected with people over reviews before. So I have a beta reader who is now one of my best friends. She left a review on my first novel, and it was a very long review. She said that if I ever needed a beta reader for future books, to reach out to her. And I saw the review, and my second book was in the works, and I reached out to her, and she's been with me for every book since then.
Awesome.
And we've developed a wonderful friendship. And if I'm stuck on something, I can call her and I can say, Elizabeth isn't cooperating. What do I do? And she has a wonderful way of pulling ideas out of my brain that I didn't know were in there. But all of that started just from her leaving a review on one of my books. So every time I see something positive on there, it really makes my day. And I think I can't imagine it ever changing no matter how many reviews I get. They always just, it's wonderful.
So when you have lots of money in the bank and like Harry Potter level following, you're going to answer all your fan mail and you're going to go through and
Yes, definitely.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Jane. And for all of you out there, if you are interested in reading Jayne Bamber, come to the library and check out Madness in Maritime or Outmatched or Five Daughters. And then once that piques your interest, go on Amazon and buy her books. Thank you, Jane.
Thank you so much, Drew.